In this demo, we will take a look at the install flow and the end user experience when deploying McAfee Endpoint Security for Mac 10.2.3 from ePO on a machine running macOS High Sierra. macOS High Sierra is a new operating system that is being released by Apple. As part of the new operating system release, Apple is also introducing a feature called the Secure Kernel Extension Loading. Secure kernel extension loading blocks any third-party kernel extension that is attempting to load for the first time on the operating system. The expectation is that the end user provide explicit consent to all third-party kernel extensions. As a result, the installation flow of McAfee Endpoint Security for Mac 10.2.3 has undergone a few changes. We will take a look at those in this video. For the purpose of the demo, I have a VM here that is running macOS High Sierra Golden Master image. Also, in the interest of time, I have already managed this machine to ePO. This machine is currently running McAfee Agent 5.0.6. Now, McAfee Agent 5.0.6 platform compatibility update will be the version that supports macOS High Sierra. All previous builds and versions of McAfee Agent will not support High Sierra. So please ensure that the machine is running the right compatibility update version of McAfee Agent before upgrading the operating system to High Sierra. Now let's deploy the product on this machine. I already have a deployment task created. Let's set it to run immediately. If you take a look at the deployment task, I have selected all the three modules of McAfee Endpoint Security for Mac. It's the threat prevention, firewall, and web control modules. Let's pull down the task. Now, during the installation, the end user will not see any pop-ups coming up till the installation is completed. The reason is that the product does not attempt to load any of its kernel extension at the time of installation. The attempt to load the kernel extension happens about 10 minutes after the installation. Now, when the attempt is made to load the kernel extension, the operating system also tries to identify all the kernel extensions that belong to the same developer, in this case McAfee. Hence, by attempting to load the kernel extensions about 10 minutes after the installation, we ensure that all the kernel extensions that are expected to be present on the machine that belong to the various modules of Endpoint Security for Mac are automatically identified by the operating system. This will aid when the user provides consent to the McAfee software. With one consent, all the kernel extensions that belong to the product will get approval. Apart from this interval after installation, there is one other flow where the kernel modules might try to load, and this is when a policy enforcement is attempted by McAfee agent. So whichever flow happens first, based on that, the kernel extension will try to load. In this video, we will wait for the product to load the kernel extension about 10 minutes after the installation. Let's close the browser. Now, since I had selected the web control module also for installation, I'm being presented with this window with an expectation that I enable the Safari web control extension. Now, this is an expectation set by Apple that the user give explicit consent to all browser extensions. So let's give the consent. Let's close the browser. Now let's quickly take a look at the console. As you can see, the threat prevention and firewall modules have been disabled by default. Now this was done by the installer because it detected that the installation is happening on a macOS High Sierra machine that does not have a MDM profile. Let's close the console. As you can see, the installation completed, but the user was not presented with any pop-up messages. As you can see, without any user intervention, the product attempted to load its kernel extension. And that's when the operating system's secure kernel extension loading feature kicked in, and it blocked the McAfee kernel extension from loading. Now here's a message that is now being displayed by the operating system. It states that the McAfee software was blocked, and if the user wants to enable it, he can do the same from the security and privacy system preferences. At the same time, the product also displays an alert to the user stating that the system's security preferences are blocking McAfee software from loading. Now this alert has two options, OK and cancel. Cancel would only close the alert, and when user clicks on OK, the product automatically launches the security and privacy system preferences pane for the user. Now let's click OK on this message. Let's click OK on the McAfee alert. As you can see, the security and privacy system preferences pane was automatically launched, and the user now has an option to allow the McAfee software. Now before doing that, let's quickly push the product properties up to EPO. We will use the McAfee agent status monitor and click the first option, which is collect and send properties. Now let's take a look at the EPO console quickly and see what were the properties that were sent out. Now let's quickly take a look at the properties. As you can see, all the product properties have come up, and the EPO admin now knows that the installation was successful and that all the modules were installed on the machine. Now if he selects the threat prevention entry and scrolls down, he would see that the on-access scan compliance status is set to non-compliant. This is because the on-access scan is currently in the disabled state, though the machine has a policy which expects the on-access scan to be enabled. Now similarly, let's take a look at the firewall product properties. If you look at the compliance section, even firewall is now deemed non-compliant on the macOS High Sierra machine. The reason being, firewall is also disabled. Now, similarly, let's quickly take a look at the endpoint security platform properties. You would see that the self-protection feature, which also needs a kernel extension to be loaded, is currently in the non-compliant state. Now this is how an EPO admin will be able to identify the macOS High Sierra machines where user consent has still not been provided. So what he would be able to do is go to the queries and reports section of the EPO. Now under the McAfee group, you would find the endpoint security section. Endpoint security extensions ship compliance queries by default. So if you search for compliance, you would see that there are a few compliance queries that are already available for EPO admin to execute. Now, one of them being the firewall compliance status. Now, if the admin chooses to run this, you would see that there are a few machines which are non-compliant. And the machine that is currently non-compliant is the machine which is being used for the demo. Now, similarly, let's quickly take a look at the compliance queries of on-access scan. As you can see, there's a non-compliant machine here as well. And if you see, it's the demo machine which is being deemed non-compliant for on-access scan as well. Similarly, for self-protection, there is a compliance status. Running it and looking at the non-compliant machines would tell you that the demo machine is also one of them. So this is how an EPO admin will be able to pull out compliance reports and identify macOS High Sierra machines where the end user has still not given a consent. And then he could probably follow up with the end users and encourage them to give consent to the McAfee software. Now let's give consent to the software on the macOS High Sierra machine. And then enforce policies. We will use the McAfee agent status monitor. Let's close this window. Now let's enforce the policies. As you can see, the McAfee menolet stopped showing a yellow exclamatory mark. Let's take a look. You can see now that the threat prevention and firewall modules have been enabled. Let's close the console. Let's also set up the product properties. Let's close the window. Going back to the EPO console, let's quickly take a look at the product properties now. Now if you select the threat prevention blade and scroll down, you would see that the on-access scan compliance status has now switched from a non-compliant state to a compliant state because it has now been enabled. Let's also look at the firewall product properties. Firewall compliance is also now set to a compliant state because it is enabled. Now if the EPO admin chooses to run his compliance queries, he should see that the machines show up as compliant. So let's run the firewall compliance status. As you can see, there are no machines being reported as non-compliant. And the machine used for this demo is now in the compliant state. Similarly, he can run queries for on-access scan as well. So this concludes the demo, which talks about the install flow and the end user experience when deploying McAfee Endpoint Security for Mac 10.2.3 on machine running macOS High Sierra. Thank you.